world just rolling along, just rolling along. I'm sitting on top of the world, just rolling along.
Welcome to episode 4 of the Solo Dungeon Crawler Solo Roleplay podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be continuing my ongoing Castle of the Quest session reports, along with the various OD&D rule discussions and solo role-playing rule discussions. So without further ado, let's get into this session's content. On the 19th of May, the questing knights wanted to find a band of men-at-arms and a thief to strengthen their number. They searched locally for the men-at-arms. They were happy to take any type, excluding horsemen. They had a 79% chance of finding some troops. I rolled percentile dice to find out whether they did and who they found. So I previously covered hiring of non-player characters in Castle of the Quest. I think it was session 5 and session 12, and I have developed some of these rules a little bit further, incorporating some of the ideas I came across in the Judges Guild Ready reference sheets, which has a less mathematical approach to this process. But the main difference is that a formal recruitment campaign is not necessarily required when it comes to hiring characters, because depending on what kind of settlement the party are travelling through, there is a chance that some of the positions that they are looking to fill can be sourced locally. In OD&D, in the core rulebooks, the 3 brown books, it tells us that men-at-arms can be hired to participate in and share the profits from some adventure. They can be men, dwarves or elves, and chaotic characters may wish to employ orcs. So taking the simple guidelines that already exist and running away with it, there is a chance men-at-arms can be found locally according to some specific probabilities. And of course, failing that, a formal recruitment campaign can be carried out by advertising. So for this, I've come up with a simple table that runs from 1 to 100. Each type of men-at-arms has a % chance to be available locally. Non-fighters have an 18% chance, Lightfoot 14, Heavyfoot 14, Armoured Foot 7, Archer 7, Crossbow 11, Longbow 7, Light Horse 7, Medium Horse 7, and Heavy Horse 6%. And the size of the settlement will indicate how many rolls on the table are allowed. So a village allows 2 rolls on the table, a town allows 4 rolls on the table, and a city allows 6 rolls on the table. So if one of the results is non-fighters, basically to explain what a non-fighter is, they are unreliable poor fighters, and when in combat a morale check must be rolled for each non-fighter before they will move, attack or defend, and figures that fail to attack will stand unmoved. If they fail to defend, they will flee. So I'll post this table on my blog for those who are interested in taking a closer look. So you'll be able to find that at solodungeoncrawler.blogspot.com. So the party found some interested candidates, but they were not formally trained fighters. Believing they can do better, the party decided to advertise throughout Pylea instead for both suitable men-at-arms and a thief. And there are 4 inns in town which the characters can visit in order to help them locate a thief. They did this to boost the effectiveness of their campaign. The party spent 50 gold pieces in each establishment to achieve 5d4 minus 3 effectiveness, and that resulted in a 9% effectiveness. They managed to recruit a dwarven thief and 5 heavy-foot dwarven men-at-arms, but unfortunately they were unable to secure any archers. So just to explain what happened here, the party were using a method of recruitment known as frequenting inns and taverns, as described in the 3 little OD&D books. And the AD&D DMG does expand on this concept and provide some guidelines on calculating the effectiveness of such a method. So to partially paraphrase and put into a OD&D context, the special costs for frequenting inns and taverns is a combination of the price of a round of drinks for the house and a fee to the barkeep to mention the prospective employer to adventurers. For each 10 gold pieces, with a 50 gold piece maximum of fee, there is a 1% to 4% bonus to the chance of being answered. Up to 10 establishments can be so worked, but for each visited, the effectiveness of the others is reduced by 1%. Therefore, the PC had better spend in excess of 20 gold pieces in payments to innkeepers and barkeeps if he or she is planning to try this method in more than a few establishments. And again, I'll post the tables that I put together for both frequenting inns and taverns and sourcing men-at-arms locally up on my blog at solodungeoncrawler.blogspot.com. And just for information, if it wasn't obvious, the party are in their hometown, known as the Last Redoubt, which is a town, not a city. So they had up to 4 rolls on the table to see what kind of men-at-arms they found. The party only made 1 roll, and that's because I also decided to add some kind of limit or some implication on time in the campaign, that a single roll requires a whole day of searching. And I'm sure you've realised by now, but in the implied OD&D world, time is money. In order to pay for the recruitment campaign, the party had to visit a jeweller and sell a piece of the jewellery received on their last adventure. So I'm just going to briefly discuss or provide an overview of how a recruitment campaign works when a party wish to advertise for the positions. As the OD&D rulebooks tell us, in order to hire men-at-arms or specialists by advertising, it is necessary to do one or both of the following: post notices in conspicuous places stating the positions open and who is offering such employ, or have servitors circulate in public places seeking such persons as are desired. The weekly cost of either method is from 100 to 600 gold pieces. The referee must determine the probability of the success of the attempt based upon the generosity of the offer made, and so on. Elves and dwarves are not common, and specialists are even less so. Like I said, I did cover how I approach recruitment in previous Castle of the Quest videos. However, having found an alternative method in the Judges Guild Ready reference sheets, I decided to take what was in the Ready reference sheets and also go back to the source and look at those passages in the 3 brown books and come up with something that not only complements the way that people approached this problem in the late 70s, using the third-party Judges Guild content, and then look back at the method that I came up with, which was heavily inspired by what Gary Gygax put in the Dungeon Master's Guide for AD&D, and basically take all this and then filter it through the 3 brown books to make sure there is no contradictions in what is being said in those books, which essentially means that some things are cast aside, and what you end up with is something that is essentially quite true to the spirit of the original game. So that's what I did. So I'm gonna sort of give you an overview now of what those rules ended up being like. So firstly, if we look at the methods of advertising, we have posting notices, which will have a weekly cost of 100 to 600 gold pieces, and that allows 1 roll on a table to find out how effective it is, and I'll get to that table very shortly. The second method is hiring servitors, and that also costs 100 to 600 gold pieces and provides 1 roll on the table to determine its effectiveness. And then you can also use a combination of above, which costs 200 to 1200 gold pieces, and that allows 2 rolls on the table to determine the effectiveness, but it has a minus 10% chance of being answered for each of these rolls. So this essentially means that when you're using more than one method, you are slightly less efficient, and the reach of the recruitment campaign is presumed to spread throughout the entire known kingdom. Before commencing a recruitment campaign, the recruiting player should write an advertisement. This should include a list of which types of NPCs they are wanting to recruit, along with desired numbers. And as a rule of thumb, initial payments and shares of treasure should be discussed in the final negotiations and not included in the ad. So in my case, Brie Landau wanted a thief of any race, of any alignment, and she desired just 1. She was also looking for 5 heavy foot of any race and any alignment, and she was looking for 5 archers of any race and any alignment. And she wanted to use posting notices, hiring servitors, and of course frequenting inns and taverns to find the resources that she needed. So to describe the table that determines how effective the campaign is, across the top we have various columns which are the percent chance of being answered according to type. So there is a 1 to 50% chance of a non-fighter, a 1 to 40 for lightfoot, a 40 for heavyfoot, a 30 for crossbow, 20 for light horse, 20 for medium horse, 20 for heavy horse, 20 for short bow or armoured foot, and 20 for longbow. And on the left hand side you have the race of the applicant, which includes human, half-elf, elf, dwarf or orc. And the idea is to group the number answering into increments of 5 and roll separately for each of these groups. And if the race or alignment is specified in the ad but is not rolled, then the ad is not answered. Now the chance of being answered is also adjusted. There are various bonuses and penalties. So applying to this particular situation, for every settlement that has a population under 300, there is a penalty if there are multiple listings on an ad, i.e. you're looking for a specialist or you're looking for some men-at-arms and using one advertisement to do so, then this multiple listing will also induce a penalty. There's also penalties for unspecifying alignment, using multiple methods of advertising, and so on and so forth. In terms of looking for hirelings, like the thief, the chance of being answered has a separate table. Along the top there is the cleric, the thief and the fighter, magic user, druid, monk, illusionist, and the available races down the left hand side, along with their percentage chance in each column. For example, the cleric has a 100% chance of being human, A thief would have a 66% chance of being a human, and then 66 to 77 is half elf, 78 to 88 elf, 89 to 100 is dwarf, and so on. Each type of hireling has their specified chances of being the various races that are available to that class. So of course this is quite a lot to take in, especially if you're listening audio only. This will also be on YouTube as a video, and I'll put the tables on the screen so they can be looked at. And also I'm going to post these rules on my blog at solodungeoncrawler.blogspot.com. So Brie Landell had just a 4% chance of being answered by a thief, and happened to roll a 3 on the percentile, so very lucky to have recruited a thief. There was a 24% chance of being answered by Heavyfoot, and on a roll of 11, the call was answered. There was only a 4% chance of being answered by Archers, and the call was not answered in regards to the Archers. So another campaign was run starting on the 26th of May for the Archers again. This time there was a 12% chance of being answered. And the reason why the chance has gone up is, of course, there is no multiple listing this time. There was also a bonus for a repeated ad, and this time triple pay was offered, which provided a bonus as well. But unfortunately, this wasn't quite enough, and no Archers answered the call. So to give you a brief rundown on the number answering the recruitment campaign, it's a simple roll on a table with percentile die, with a column for non-fighters, a column for men-at-arms and hirelings, and a column for specialists. And with non-fighters anywhere from 40 to 120 applicants could apply for the role, with men-at-arms and hirelings anywhere from 20 to 100 could answer the call, and specialists, the range is from 1 to 6. So in Brie Landell's recruitment campaign, in the end there were 15 thieves of human race and neutral alignment who wanted a share of treasure who applied, 6 thieves of human race chaotic alignment. There were 5 dwarven thieves of neutral alignment, 5 half-elf thieves of neutral alignment, and there were 15 human heavyfoot of neutral alignment, 15 human heavyfoot of lawful alignment, 10 human heavyfoot of chaos alignment, 5 half-elf heavyfoot of chaos alignment, 2 half-elf heavyfoot of neutral alignment, 5 dwarven heavyfoot of lawful alignment, 5 dwarven heavyfoot of neutral alignment, and finally 5 elven heavyfoot of neutral alignment. And on the 27th of May, which was actually my birthday, recruitment negotiations took place. Various bonuses and penalties applied to these negotiations, and they were handled with reaction rolls. So adjustments are charisma score, racial preferences, alignment. So after interviewing each of the separate groups of candidates, it seemed that it was just the dwarven neutral thief and the 5 heavyfoot dwarven men-at-arms of neutral alignment that successfully acquired positions. So again, if you want to look at these rules in detail and possibly use them in your own campaign, then visit solodungeoncrawler.blogspot.com, because I will post a PDF up there which provides the whole rules for recruiting NPCs. This also includes tables to roll the equipment for the NPCs. So the party have hired a dwarven thief who is wearing leather armour and carries a dagger, and the pay agreement was 500 gold pieces up front. The 5 heavyfoot dwarves are wearing chainmail, carrying a shield, wearing a helm, and wielding battle axes, and the pay agreement was 4 gold pieces per month. The thief has quite a high loyalty of 13, which gives them a +1 on the morale checks, and the heavyfoot dwarves have an 8, which gives them a -1 on the morale checks. And of course, these are rolled up after the recruitment has taken place in accordance with the table given in Men and Magic. On the 28th of May, the party wished to find a sage in order to gain the formula for a healing potion, so that they might take it to an alchemist and have them produce a supply of healing potions. They will need to have a laboratory constructed in their stronghold in order to attract an alchemist, which will take some time, but for now, visiting a sage will help them lighten their encumbrance of coins. The party travelled the 5 miles from the last redoubt to Plain Sands, to the questing knight's knowledge, the largest settlement in Pylea. So in regards to settlements, I like to keep a record sheet of each settlement, and on that I record all the details pertaining to that particular settlement. I record the type of settlement, its population, its percentage racial distribution, and the services available, which includes food, drink and lodging, common crafts and trade, rare crafts and trade, specialists, NPC services, and transport. For the larger settlement, like Plain Sands, I also record the names of the individual districts or quarters in the settlement, and for each district I also record what services are available in that particular district. And like anything, as I progress through my campaign and new things are discovered, a lot of these record sheets evolve. To determine what services are available in a given settlement, I have some rules, and these are quite closely based on the rules given in the World Builder's Handbook. And the way my version of these rules works is as follows. A thorp, which is a settlement with less than 100 inhabitants, will have no services available, and no basic equipment can be purchased other than standard rations. And this is actually based on the rules of the original Dungeons & Dragons draft, which was typewritten by Gary Gygax. And the copy of this I have is the one that has been printed in the 50th anniversary book that Wizards of the Coast put out, The Making of Dungeons & Dragons. For all other types of settlement, chance should be multiplied by the number of blocks of 100 people and rolled on percentile die to determine if the service is available. If the chance is over 100%, then there is always 1 per 100% plus a further percentage chance of another as per the remainder. So to give an example, to find out if an alchemist is available in a given settlement, there is a 1% chance per 100 people. So a population of 500 would wield a 5% chance of an alchemist. To describe the journey the questing knights took to reach Plain Sands, they set out by wagon, and they can move 20 miles per day, which is included in OD&D Book 3 as 4 hexes. That pertains to a 5 mile per hex scale, so that computes to 20 miles or 21 mile hexes. So as I was using and following quite closely the wilderness exploration rules in D&D Book 3, the party set out on the 28th of May, and they became lost as they attempted to travel. So they attempted to travel southwest from the last redoubt towards the surrounding woodland and instead of heading southwest, they headed into the northeast woodlands, where they had to cross a river. I rolled a d6 to test whether the river was fordable, and as the river had a ford, it could be crossed fairly easily. After travelling a mile in the wrong direction, the party made a direction change. The Underworld and Wilderness Adventures book, D&D Volume 3, dedicates just 1.5 pages of its 30 plus pages of rules to movement across a wilderness hex map. There are a couple of references to Outdoor Survival, the early 70s wilderness survival board game. For the most part, OD&D implies that terrain penalties are the main thing to be adopted if using a referee's map for exploratory adventures, but the text regarding lost parties is intriguing. The Underworld and Wilderness rulebook tells us that there is a chance of being lost, the chance depending on the type of terrain the party begins its turn upon. A lost party must move in the direction indicated by the die roll 1 to 6 as shown in the Outdoor Survival rules and on that board, and may make only one direction change from that direction. When exploring, the referee should indicate which direction the party is lost in. So two things leap out at me in the passage of text that I just read. Firstly, that the party can make only one direction change, and secondly, the referee should indicate which direction the party is lost in. Why do I think these things are important? They imply a challenging limitation must be made in regards to movement when a party becomes lost. Also, the referee should tell the party they are lost and in which direction they are lost in. So really, the party can simply correct their movement by going back the way they came, costing them only a little time. This doesn't seem quite right to me. It feels like something is missing. Then I spotted a line in the Outdoor Survival rules that states, parties may never make a 180-degree turn, that is, re-enter a hex just left. This particular piece of text brought me to thinking, how was wilderness movement meant to work in OD&D? Is it presumed that the method of movement in Outdoor Survival should apply? If this is the case, which I actually think it is, then we can extrapolate some things that have an interesting impact on how we would approach OD&D wilderness adventures. Outdoor Survival has several direction ability cards for different scenarios, whether the party are lost, searching, rescuing, etc. It makes sense to use searching as the basis for some implied rules. It's the least restrictive and the most appropriate to an exploratory adventure, and if we remove any further limitations that don't seem intended for OD&D, we may get something that looks like the following. Movement is calculated in terms of hexes. Basically, a party expends one movement point for its total movement point allowance for each hex entered. To enter some types of hexes requires more than one movement point. See terrain penalties in D&D Volume 3. Parties may move over different types of terrain as long as they have sufficient movement points to enter that particular type of terrain. Thus, a party with a movement factor of 2 could not move at all if surrounded by mountain or swamp hexes. Movement may be in two ways, straight with no turns or straight with turns. The party may start in any direction. After moving one or more hexes, they may make as many direction changes as desirable unless they become lost. The party is not required to move at all during a turn and may move less than their current movement allowance. Parties may never make a 180-degree turn, that is, re-enter a hex just left. Parties must move straight in the new direction after turning. They may turn at any point after the first hex is entered, but it is never required for them to turn. A party may enter a trail hex at the movement cost of 1, only if they enter that trail hex through a hex side which is clear terrain or pierced by a trail. In regards to rivers and fords, Terrain penalties for entering a hex with a river always applies regardless of whether or not the river is actually crossed. Fords do not have the same qualities as trails. They merely negate the river in that particular hex for purposes of movement across the river. I also decided to add my own little rule that there is a 2 in 6 chance that a river has a ford. If the river is within 5 miles of a settled hex, then there is a 4 in 6 chance. This rule was added because I randomly generate my wilderness, so it is not predetermined whether a river is actually fordable. In conclusion, I think incorporating some of these elements from outdoor survival helps make sense of the rules for parties getting lost and having a single direction change limitation. I also think it makes the game a tad more interesting and removes the advantage given to players if the referee is supposed to tell them that they are lost and tell them which direction they are lost in. Additionally, for solo OD&D games, these additional rules help to enforce a few things to make soloing through the wilderness less ambiguous. Now a player can find his party lost and have no meta advantage. For a transcription of this particular discussion pertaining to wilderness movement, please visit my blog at solodungeoncrawler.blogspot.com, where I've posted an article. Feel free to let me know what you think there, or let me know what you think in the comments of this particular episode. So the party moved west deeper into the forest of Evilshore, and to prevent going too far off track, they decided to stop and gather their bearings. And after a wandering monster check, luckily for them, they got through the night without an encounter. They do not have enough wine, however, to satisfy the day's needs, and also had to consume a day's worth of rations. The OD&D books don't actually provide any rules for hunger and thirst, but again, much can be extrapolated from outdoor adventures. I did that, and I came up with the following rules for hunger and thirst. Water index. At the end of each turn in which the current day's needs for water are not met, note swamp hexes or bodies of water running through settled hexes may not be used to satisfy water needs. The party advance along a water index to the right. Whenever movement along the water index hits a trigger point, the party loses a life level. For example, if at the end of the first turn, each turn represents 1 day, the party did not satisfy the first day's needs for water, they must move into the second block along on the water index. The second block does not trigger a life level change. However, if the party does not satisfy their needs for water in the second turn, then they must move to the third block. That move does trigger a life level change. The party's movement reduces to an allowance of 5/6. So if the party were moving 20 miles per day, they are now reduced to 16 miles per day. 20 divided by 6 multiplied by 5 is 16. It is possible that a party could trigger a change in life level on both the food and water indexes on the same turn. In such cases, the effects are added together, and the resulting sum is subtracted from the life level index. In cases where a party is able to satisfy more than just the current day's needs, they may recover life levels by passing trigger points in the opposite manner to the left. For example, if a party is on the 5th block of the water index and they recover 2 steps, then they are moved back to the 3rd block, and if the party is at life level 13, they move back up to life level 14. Food index. Treat the same as for water index. You will note, however, that one's physical condition deteriorates at a much faster rate from lack of water than from lack of food. Again, as with water, it is possible to recover lost life levels. However, in no case may food or water indexes regain food or water further to the left than the first block. Life level index. The party start their wilderness adventure with a life level of 15. The party will lose a life level on their 3rd, 5th, 6th and 7th day without water, the party will lose a life level on their 5th, 9th, 12th, 15th, 18th, 20th, 22nd, 23rd and 24th day without food. As their life level decreases, so does their movement rate. If a party at life level 1 are required to lose one or more life levels, then death occurs. So, at life level 15, the party's movement rate is full, and they have no attack or armor class penalty. When they reach life level 14 to 13, they move at 5/6 their movement rate, and they have a -1 penalty to attack and armor class. When they reach life level 12 through to 11, they move at 2/3 their movement rate and have a -2 penalty. Life level 10 or 9, half movement rate, -3 penalty. Life level 8 to 7, 1/3 movement, -4 penalty. Life level 6 to 5, 1/6 movement rate, -5 penalty. And finally, anywhere from life level 4 through to 1, the movement rate is 0 and the party cannot attack or defend. In regards to water, if water or wine is expended, you can satisfy the current day's needs for water if you pass through or end your movement on a water hex. You may also recover 1 step on the water index by remaining stationary for the following 3 turns on a water hex. You can also satisfy the current day's needs for water on a non-water hex by rolling a 1 or 2 after ending the current day's movement. If you are lost, you can only satisfy your current day's needs for water if you end your movement on a water hex. Moving through such hexes does not satisfy your needs, nor does rolling a 1 or 2. In regards to food, if rations have been exhausted, you can satisfy the current day's needs for food by rolling a 1 or 2 after ending the current day's movement. You may recover 3 steps on the food index by remaining stationary for 3 turns. If you are lost, you cannot satisfy your current day's needs for food. If there are sufficient rations, water, wine, etc. to satisfy the current day's needs for the whole party, then treat this as a day without food or water for the whole party, also removing any of these provisions from the party's inventory. So, back to the game. Beginning the day on the 29th of May, a D6 roll was 3. The party did not become lost on their second day of travel. They travelled through 2 miles of forest until they came to a river where the forest opened onto a plain. There was a 2 in 6 chance the river had a ford, and a die roll of 5 meant that, as it did not, the party did not cross it easily. So far, the day's travel had cost them 6 of their 20 points of movement, or 6 of their daily limit of 20 miles, and they had only travelled 3 miles. However, the next 3 miles were relatively easy. They crossed the Great Plain and finally made it to the town of Plain Sands. On the 29th of May, the party entered Plain Sands, and the party were charged duties of 115 gold pieces and forced to pay a 10% tithe for their treasure, meaning they had to hand over a further 610 platinum pieces. As I've explained in a previous episode, duties, taxes and tithes are baked into my random generator for urban adventures, which basically works very similar to a dungeon generator, but passages become streets and various random buildings can be rolled up. In this episode I also touched on keeping records of the services that are available in the various districts of a settlement. So when a random building is rolled, often a random service available in the particular district that is being explored will need to be determined to indicate what that building is. So as the party were making their way through the Ink and Shadow district of Plain Sands, they passed a contaminated slaughterhouse. Each character had a 2 in 6 chance of being exposed to typhoid fever. So I rolled a d6 for each of the 9 characters. Viridis, Hilda and Sister Galantia were all exposed to the filth in the air and had to save against poison. But with 2 rolls of 19 and a 15, none of them caught the disease. And the diseases that can be picked up when travelling through some of these settlements are based on the diseases and the rules relating to those diseases from Blackmore. And as I've also mentioned previously, the rules for randomly generating these urban settings and urban adventures are still a work in progress. So at some point I'll probably share them as a PDF on my blog. You might note that I've been posting more of my rules on there just recently, and including some PDFs which can of course be downloaded for printing and personal use. All I ask is if they're broadcast in any way or shared with others, just credit me and I would definitely appreciate that. So further along the street, they came to a tavern and noticed a trapdoor outside leading down into a cellar beneath. As they continued moving east past a large engineer's hall, Bree noticed creeping vines climbing up a boundary wall on the south side of the street, offering a way past one of the inner guardhouses, if need be. As the party were making their way east towards a place where the street turns slightly to the right, more than a score of brigands cut round the far side of a boundary wall. The questing knights heard them coming, but the brigands were surprised by the party, almost bumping into them as they suddenly came around the corner. So, taking advantage of a surprise round, Ilara, in an attempt to defuse any possible violence, apologised to the brigands and offered them 200 platinum pieces as a bribe to prevent any possibility of them attempting to raid the wagon. So to make the OD&D rules a little bit more robust for situations like this, I have some rules designed to fill in the blanks a little bit regarding adjustments for reaction rolls after a party has attempted to communicate. If a character attempts to communicate with the monsters, then the following additional adjustments apply. So a charisma score for whoever is conversing of 3 results in a -3 penalty to the monster's reaction roll. Charisma 4 to 6 is a -2 penalty. 7 or 8 -1. 9 through 12 no adjustment. 13 or 14 +1. 15 through to 18 is +2. I also have a racial preferences table, which is based on a similar one in the AD&D Player's Handbook. Dwarves communicating with dwarves get a +3 bonus, a -2 bonus for elves, -1 for half-elves, +2 for halflings, and -1 for human. Elves communicating with dwarves do so at a -2 penalty, a +3 bonus for elves, +1 for half-elves, no bonus for halflings, -1 for humans. Halflings communicating with dwarves do so at +2, +2 for elves, +1 for half-elves, +3 for halflings, -1 for humans. Humans are -1 when communicating with everyone except other humans, where they gain a +3 bonus. Goblins and kobolds will never negotiate with dwarves, and the maximum adjustment allowed to a reaction roll can never exceed +4. In a solo game, the content of the communication can simply remain ambiguous. The discussion which takes place can be presumed to be related to a possible exchange of directions, bribes to avoid conflict, or offers of services. simply make another reaction roll applying the relevant adjustments. Uncertain reaction rolls leave the player open to trying to influence the monster's reaction by paying a bribe or attempting to communicate. The party can also attempt to influence monsters if they win the initiative roll, or gain a surprise round, which is what happened in our case. I think I've covered bribes already, and they can be offered to influence an intelligent monster's reaction roll in the form of gold pieces or equivalent value, and this is based on hit die, i.e. 200 gold pieces per hit die and up results in the max +4 bonus. 40 gold pieces per hit die would provide just a +1 bonus. 70 for +2 and 100 for +3. I'll stick all this up on my blog as a PDF and an article if you'd like to look at these rules at your leisure and possibly use them in your own games. So following the bribe, the brigands rolled a positive reaction roll. Ilara asked the brigands for directions to the sage, and they obliged. And to handle this, I just allowed several rolls against the random generator, and I drew the map until the next building appeared, which will automatically be the sage's home or place of work. The sage's house was no more than a javelin throw away at the bottom of the path ahead. So the party visited the sage's house, and some rolls, in accordance with standard OD&D rules, indicated that the sage was below average and had a 20% chance to know an answer and will cost 2,000 gold pieces in wages. So the OD&D books don't really talk about short-term employment of a sage, so I had to borrow some ideas from the AD&D DMG, and I decided that short-term employment of a sage would work as follows. Upon locating a sage, any class of character can ask him or her to answer one or more questions. Such short-term employment cannot last beyond 1 week's time, and the sage will thereafter not be available for at least 1 game month, as there are more important and constructive things to be done than answering foolish questions anyway. So a below average sage costs 200 gold pieces. I calculated costs proportionally, so the lowest level is equal to 1 month of wages for a low level sage, as per Blackmore. Each level is then based on this cost multiplied by the % increase in the sage's chance to know the answer to a question. Again, see Blackmore. This result is then further multiplied by the number of categories the sage knows. So a low average sage is 3,500 gold pieces, exceptionally knowledgeable 4,000, average with 2 categories 12,000, and so on and so forth. I then had to look at the various specializations, and it seemed appropriate that the category of physical and subcategory of chemistry would be the most obvious for whether a sage knows a potion formula. So the percentile die roll indicated that the sage's basic category is living things and their history. So the sage was not suitable for the questing knight's needs. It appeared the party had wasted a journey. The party retraced their steps back to the tavern, where they attempted instead to uncover any interesting legends that might be drifting around Plainsands. So this is just a little something that I came up with to make visiting taverns just a tad more interesting and enforce the kind of emergent play that I'm trying to carve out with my own solo rules. So a roll of a die 4 is appropriate for this, and on a 1, a legend has been heard regarding a monster lair, and a roll for direction, and then on a monster lair table will indicate where this monster lair is and what type of monster lair it is. And the direction table is just a d6, random direction, north, northeast, southeast, south, southwest or northwest. and then another die 6 to determine the distance, 1 to 6 miles, 2 to 12, 1 to 100, 2 to 200, 3 to 300, or 4 to 400, with the 4 to 400 having a 10% probability of the distance being multiplied by a further 1 to 6 times. There is also another column for distance, which is only applicable if a 6 is rolled on a d6, and those distances range from 10 to 60 through to 40 to 4,000 feet. So these would be lairs that are close in proximity to where the legend has been heard. And the monster lair table is basically something I put together. I painstakingly went through all the OD&D monster descriptions and picked out everything that can be considered to have a lair and place these into the various categories: men, giants, true giants, undead, flyers, dragons, lycanthropes, swimmers, enchanted demons, miscellaneous, and animals. I'll share these rules for generating legends on my blog, solodungeoncrawler.blogspot.com. So I decided there was a 1 in 4 chance that the party would hear a legend, which piques their interest. But as they rolled a 4, they heard nothing worth seeking out on this occasion, so the party decided to call it a day and return home to the last redoubt. But before they headed out, they quenched their thirst at the tavern and refilled their wineskins, which cost them 50 gold pieces in total. So before the day was out, the party set out to return to the last redoubt. This time they did not become lost. From the vantage point of Plain Sands, they were able to see a lake surrounded by woodland northwest. There were mountains to the west, from which a river cascaded into the sea. Then the Great Plain continues to the southwest and gives way to desert to the southeast. So this description is based on the die rolls that randomise the wilderness terrain surrounding the hex that the party were currently on at that time. So they made it home without trouble, and that was where this particular adventure ended. So this wasn't the most exciting adventure that the party have had so far, but there are a couple of quite important points that I felt arose from this example. It shows that excess funds that are picked up through hunting for treasure can deplete quite quickly when playing an emergent game, because the party will set out in order to gain certain things, achieve certain goals, and often they do not find what they're looking for and instead run into trouble or various obstacles that can only be overcome by letting go of precious treasures. And often, to save on encumbrance, treasure is sold and may be converted to gems or more valuable coin. And what happens often then is, in order to bribe their way out of a situation, they end up having to part with more than they wish they had to, because a monster's basically not going to hand over change after being bribed. So now we've reached the end of this episode. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and I hope that you found value in the information that was given. Hope you have a great week, and I will see you in the next session.